Hello world, Shelly here, and today I want to help you learn how to figure out if an eyeshadow is warm toned or cool toned or neutral, because putting together eye looks, you can pick colors that are suited to your skin tone. If you are cool toned, you likely look good in cool toned eyeshadow, and if you are warm toned, you likely look good in warm toned eyeshadow. If you're neutral, bravo, you probably look good in both. But being able to figure that out can be very helpful in choosing your colors or even putting a look together if you want to get some balance between warm, neutral, and cool. So first we're going to talk about the two parts of a color that essentially determine whether it's warm or cool or neutral. And then we'll take a look at three different ways that you can test eyeshadows to give yourself a better idea. After a while, I promise you, you will just look at a color and be like, ooh, that's leaning warm. That's leaning cool. Oh, that's very warm. That's very cool. Oh, that one's neutral. You're just going to know because you'll just get used to seeing what they look like. So let's start out with the two different parts of the color that will determine if it's warm or cool or neutral. I'm just going to say warm or cool. Let's just assume neutral is an option as well. Number one, the color itself. So the base of the color. If you've got a color that is like red, orange, yellows, peachy colors, those are typically warm colors. When you have the grays and the blues and the purples, those are typically cool colors. Now here's where it gets confusing. You've heard of cool toned reds, right? Especially when it comes to lipstick. Everyone wants the cool toned red because that makes your teeth whiter. Why? Because a cool toned red has a blue undertone to it. Teeth that are not quite white are usually leaning yellow, and the blue undertone in the cool toned red counteracts the yellow in not white teeth, making them look brighter and whiter. So the fact that the undertone, that second part of the color, can alter whether that color overall is shifting warm or shifting cool, that's the confusing part. So you can't just say, all purples are cool toned, all reds are warm toned. It just isn't that simple. So let's talk about the undertone. Basically, the undertone is when a color has just a smidge of a different color in it that is going to shift the warmth and the coolness. So typically, like let's say you have a red. If it's got a little bit of blue to it, it's going to shift cool. If you've got a purple and it's got a little bit of red in it, it's going to shift warm, and so on and so forth. Some colors aren't really going to have a lot of shift. Think about yellow. You're not going to find too many yellows that are cool toned because you can't really mix too many cool toned colors into yellow without changing it away from yellow. Same thing with like blue. You're not going to find a ton of warm toned blues because it's really hard to add a warm color to blue and not lose the blue. You're going to end up shifting in, yellow and blue make green. It's sealed. Ziploc. Whoa, good advertising there, Ziploc. Do they still say that? Is that still their tagline? That's been in my head since I was a little kid, I feel like. But other colors, especially on the deeper ends of the spectrums, the far red and the far purple, you are going to have some variation there because you can mix other colors into those without losing the original color. And therefore, you're going to have undertones that are cool or warm that shift a typically cool or warm shade into being the opposite. So, okay, that's all fine and good, right? Great explanation, but what if my brain doesn't see it? Let's talk about how to make your brain see it. Number one, have to be in good lighting. Your indoor lighting, most indoor light bulbs, for purposes of being pleasant on the eyes and making a nice ambiance, are warm toned. So you don't want to be looking at your eyeshadows under typical indoor lighting because you will be affecting what your eye sees with the lighting that you're using. Now, my exception here is I'm under studio lighting that is daylight balanced. It's meant to mimic middle of the day the most neutral kind of light. So here, it's going to look pretty spot on close to daylight. If you can look at your eyeshadows in front of an open window during the day, not open to the outside, but like the curtain is open so you get the daylight coming in, or even take them outside. Cloudy day is best. You want that nice filtered light. You don't necessarily want direct sunlight. And you also want midday between like 10 and 3. You don't want the early morning sunrise light, and you don't want the late evening sunset light, because those also shift cool and warm depending on the time of day. So you want neutral, broad daylight, middle of the daytime, or daylight balanced lighting, which in your home you probably don't have, unless you have, ring lights or camera lights that you can set to neutral. A white piece of paper is going to also be helpful. So one of the easiest ways is compare it with something that you know is warm. And not knowing what is warm, let's start out by swatching some colors onto white paper. This Mirage palette from Alter Ego. This is a very warm toned palette. When I say warm, first you're looking at the colors in general. Do we see a lot of reds, oranges? Do we see a lot of yellows, peaches, those kinds of shades? Yeah, we got a lot of that going on here. But what about things like, beige, taupe? Are they warm or cool? They can go either way. And so you start out with a palette like this. And if I were to swatch, let's do a comparison here. So I'm going to swatch this shade Endless right here, which is a brown. And I'm just going to get some on my finger and swatch it onto my white piece of paper. I'm doing white because it's straight up neutral. All right, here we go. I really should get a makeup wipe out because I'm going to be swatching a bunch of eyeshadows. I'm almost out of my last pack of makeup wipes from Boots that I got in Ireland. Is there anything special about them? No, but they came from Ireland and they make me think of Ireland, and Ireland makes me happy. Almost gone. Anyway, all right, so there's that shade Endless. And now let's go into a cool toned palette. So this is the Cloud 9 from ColourPop. And they've got a brown in here as well. So let's now, here's the thing, they're brown. Here, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you the difference. So take a look up close. Do you see how this brown, focus, do you see how this brown has red in it and this brown has gray in it? This one leans almost gray. Like, it's brown. Let me get some more on there for you. It is a brown, but it's got a lot of gray in it. That's going to kind of be the difference between your warm-toned and your cool-toned browns. Let's open up Modern Renaissance. This is a pretty warm-toned palette. And let's grab the brown out of here. Cypress Umber. I used the heck out of this palette for so long. So long. All right, this will be the third one down. Now, this one's a little more of a chocolate brown, but do you see how it is? Well, it's a little more neutral, because when you look at these three, you can really kind of tell. Reddish, grayish. This one just looks pretty much cocoa brown. Like it's not leaning either way. So I'm going to say here we've got a warm, a cool, and a neutral going on. Most eyeshadow palettes are going to be primarily warm with some neutrals or primarily cool with some neutrals. That's really just how most brands are curating their color stories. So let's take the ABH Sultry palette. This one is probably one of the coolest ABH palettes that they've got. Let's grab their brown. Whoopsie. My brush fell out. I don't use the brushes in these things. I don't like double-ended brushes. So this one's going to be the fourth one down. Yeah, this one's much cooler. So it's not as cool as this one with the gray, but do you see how similar they are? It's a little bit deeper, but it's still got that gray that gray leaning undertone to it. Do you see how much more red this one's looking now? That's brown, but it's got a red base to it, so it's a really warm brown. I recommend starting with browns because that is the easiest way to really see undertones, because other shades are just a little more obvious. Like an orange is an orange is an orange. It's gonna be warm pretty much all the time. Reds can vary. So like, let's grab Modern Renaissance again. Let's take a look. Their red is a warm toned red. And let me get it. What is this one called? I forget. Venetian red. So let's swatch this one. I did it blind. Did it work? So there is that red. Now let's go get another red and compare. So the Ace Beauty Mystic Romance palette has a red in it, and it's a more neutral to cool red, that middle shade. What is it called? Allure. And let's swatch that one. So it's underneath the ABH. It's a little bit darker, but I'm going to smear out the edge because you're really going to be able to see. Do you see how the Ace Beauty, when it smears out, it's leaning toward that bluish pink as opposed to just being like a strictly red? This one is neutral leaning cool, whereas that looked straight up red until you put it next to something that's got a little blue in it. You know what I'm saying? And it's really hard to tell looking at the pan. So if I hold these two up side by side, now these two reds do look a little bit different, but take a look side by side. Can you really tell warmth versus cool? Well, I guess the red in the ABH you kind of can. They're both in the middle here. And in the pan, it's just harder to tell. Even the pinks. I was comparing this palette to the Modern Renaissance, thinking that they had quite a bit of similarity. They're not the same, but they do have a few similar shades in them. Let's do some taupes. So this one doesn't really have a straight taupe in it, so I won't look at that one. Let's take from Modern Renaissance, let's do Antique Bronze. So this guy right here. Gosh, I haven't used my ABH palettes in a while. Their powders are so soft and buttery to the touch. Oh, I need to wear them. All right, so there's Antique Rose. And let's get, so it's on the neutral to warm side. Now I'm going to dig into the Alter Ego Mirage, which is definitely a warm palette. And let's go into Nirvana and swatch that. A little bit darker, but not much different. We're probably living in the warm side of the fence with both of these. And what other taupes do I have here? Let's go into the 1111 from ColourPop. This one is like their take on a straight up neutral palette. And my opinion of how they've accomplished this is they've gone slightly warm and slightly cool, but in undertones that will complement each other such that at the end of the day it all balances out to being neutral. This is supposed to be their palette that is like universally flattering on everybody. You know, theirs is a little bit lighter, so I'm going to grab Lucky Babe, but I was thinking this might be the other shade. That one's a little darker, but similar purpose. Let's do the Lucky Babe one and take a look at this. It's just a little bit lighter, but also neutral. So we're not leaning super warm. These are leaning a little bit warm. Do you see how, especially in this one, it just has a little orange to it? This one's a little bit less, but they're very similar. This one's just straight up neutral. It doesn't feel yellow. It doesn't feel blue. It doesn't feel gray. It doesn't feel like it's leaning either way. And if you really can't tell, then it's probably neutral because it's equally warm and cool. It's not leaning primarily either direction. Let's get the other one in the ColourPop just for the heck of it. what is that called? Perfect Harmony. It's going to be a little darker than the rest of these, but let's see how it leans. That color's really pretty. Do you see how that one has a tiny bit of a gray shift to it? So that one is leaning just a little bit on the cool side. But this 1111 palette, none of the colors lean heavily one way or the other, which is how they have pulled off this like universally flattering neutral palette. It's a really nice palette. What other palettes did I grab here? Oh, I've got the Stone Cold Fox from ColourPop is definitely a cool tone palette. This is one of my favorites. I wear cool tones all the time. So that's a hot mess. But if you look, all of the pinks have a little bit of a gray shifting lean to them. All of the taupes have a little bit of bluish gray shift to them. They have some literal blue-gray silvers in here, which is hallmark of cool tones. Yep, nothing leans warm. Nothing in this palette leans warm, even a little bit. So that is one way that you can sort of start training your eye to see warmth and cool and neutral. Does it lean a little blue or gray, or does it lean a little bit yellow or reddish for the warm side of the fence? So that is one way. The other thing you can do is, if you know or have been told what your own skin's undertone is, you can swatch a shade and see if you think it looks good or not. So let's say you've been told that your undertone is cool. If you were to go into, that's not the palette I want. I want the Cloud 9. If you were to go into a cool toned palette on your cool toned skin, chances are the shade is going to look nice. So I'm going to go into Cloud 9 and grab this like slate gray. And now I am neutral leaning cool. So now the best place to do this, do it on your underarm where it's like as pale as possible, or the top of your hand. And when you swatch a color and you look at it, does it look good on your skin, or does it look strange on your skin, or just a little off on your skin? Now, I'm neutral, so I'm very lucky in the sense that I can get away with warm or cool tones, but I do lean slightly cool, especially in the winter when I have no color to me. And I prefer slightly cool just as a personal preference. So if I go in and get a really warm shade, like this bush orange shade here in the Alter Ego Mirage, and I put this on my skin, ideally do this where you're not putting them side by side. I should have wiped that off. But if you look at a color and you think, ooh, my skin just looks off with that color, and actually this does look a little off on me. If you look at this hand, if you look at that hand, you can tell that I have a little pink undertone to my skin, which pink undertone is usually going to be a cool tone in your skin color. And so that orange is just looking a little bit off, whereas if I look just at that silver is looking, that looks all right. Like that's looking good on my skin tone. So if you can get someone to tell you what your skin tone is, then swatch a couple colors on yourself and see if it looks okay or if it looks like it's a little bit off. And then chances are, if it's cool and it looks good, the color's probably cool. If you are cool. If you are warm and the color's warm and it looks good, I'm saying this all wrong. Well, it's right, but it's just not going to make sense. If your skin is cool and you swatch a color and it looks good, that color's probably cool. If your skin is cool and you swatch a color that looks bad, it's probably a warm color. And if your skin is warm and you swatch a color that looks good, it's probably warm. If your skin is warm and you swatch a color that looks bad, it's probably cool. Not foolproof, because neutrals complicate everything, but it's another way to tell. And the third and final way to tell whether a color is warm-toned or cool-toned, and that you can kind of help yourself to learn by looking at them, is think of the color wheel from back in grammar school. Colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel are called complementary colors. And so let's say you have an eyeshadow that looks really good on your eyes, and you have green eyes. Take a look at the opposite side of the color wheel from your green eyes, and so that's going to be your reds and your oranges, and that will say, oh, well, that's probably, they complement each other, so it's probably cool toned. If you have something that enhances your, let's say, I made notes for my eyes are green, so I know green, but I don't know the other colors. If you're looking at, let's say you have brown eyes, color wheel, the blues and the greens are going to be opposite of your browns on the color wheel. If it looks good with your brown eyes, then it's probably a warm toned color. Eyes are tricky though, because you're limiting it to what the eye color is, because something can look good with your eyes and not match your skin tone at all. Personally, I try to go with things that look good with my skin tone. There's a whole lot more of my skin visible than there is of my what's that called? I was going to say pupils, but it's not. My iris of my eyes. The pupil's the inside part. Unless I'm only going to be, if people are only seeing my eyes, okay, maybe I'll pick my colors, because I've never understood why all of that, like, what colors complement green eyes? Well, if you pick colors that don't complement your skin tone, it's not going to look good no matter what. So I always go by skin tone, not eye color, when I'm picking colors that are going to complement my look. So think of the color wheel. If they're opposite, they're complementary, and then you know that if you're using your irises as your basis of comparison, not your skin, your irises of your eyes, the colored part of your eyes would be that process. So do that a bunch of times. Make yourself a swatch sheet, go through it, and look for the red, look for the yellow, look for the gray in the undertones. And then figure out if you think they're warm, neutral, or cool. And eventually, you'll be able to look at it and just kind of see it, It takes practice. It takes time. It really is just a practice thing, and seeing a lot of colors. Because eyeshadows, as much as you might think, oh, that's another one of the same kind of eyeshadow. This brings my dad to my mind. My dad used to tell me, he'd say, like, why do you need 12 different greens? Like, they're all green. No, they're not. Some are blue-green. Some are like a warmer, pushing, very warm green. Like, no, they are not all. I mean, they're all green, but they are not the same. Like, why do you need so many as green? Like, because their undertones are all different. Same with nail polish. Like, why do you need 5 different reds? Because they're all different. And if you start looking closely at your eyeshadows, especially if you start swatching them next to each other, you will see you have a lot more variety in your eyeshadow collection than you think you do. And I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that is universally true for anyone that has more than one eyeshadow palette, okay? Go through your colors, because you might be missing some, and especially swatch them, because sometimes in the pan they don't look the same as they're gonna look on your eyes. And granted, swatching on a piece of paper is not the same as putting it on your eyelid, but it's a lot more of a realistic look at the actual tone and undertone than it is in the pan, because you can see the variation of color, especially when you get a swatch and you take it long enough that you can see it kind of fade out, because that's where you're going to see a lot of the undertone happen, is in that sort of fade out part. So there you have it. Warm, cool, what are these eyeshadows? That's how you tell. You'll get better at it as you do more and more and more, and just keep looking at colors and comparing them. You really will. It'll one day it clicks and you just see them. And it's like learning a language, One day you will just start seeing it, and that is how it goes. I hope you found this helpful. Let me know, what are your favorite types of tones of colors? What do you like to wear? I challenge you, even if you just do it before you go to bed. You don't have to go out in public. You don't have to do this and go to work and wear it or whatever. Where you don't have to go to Target wearing this. Sit down before bed, whenever you would like, but it doesn't have to be high stakes. use some colors that you wouldn't normally use on your eyes. Do both eyes differently. Try colors out and see how they compare to your skin and how different they look on your eyes than they did in the pan. Hit up some of those shades that you haven't touched. If I open up this palette right now, what's the shade I haven't touched? This one right here, because I always look like my liver's failing whenever I wear yellows. But I'm going to swatch it right now because I've never swatched it, and chances are, see, it's not even as yellow as I thought it was. It is leaning a little bit yellow, but it's pretty doggone neutral. Try a color you haven't tried. See what it looks like on you. At least get a feel for how it interacts with other colors in a palette, because most of the time, unless it's like the cheapest, most undeveloped palette on the planet, which it's hard to find bad ones anymore, there's enough color curation in here that these colors should all go together. Try it. There's your challenge. There you have it. Hope you found this useful. Let me know what your favorite eyeshadows are down below. Do you love the warms? Do you love the cools? Are you a neutral person? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks a lot for taking some time out of your day to geek out over makeup with me. I appreciate your time, and I hope you guys all have an awesome day or night wherever you are in the world. Take care of each other. Bye-bye.